perspective, we know that normally the US election is quite a spectacle, and millions of dollars actually go into this election from the campaigning right until election day. And this morning we're joined by Carien Du Plessis, who is a freelance journalist covering South African and African politics and trying to understand the US election. And we now in Africa, we know what many people think of the African continent. But the key question here is what lessons can the US take from Africa, particularly at a time of an election? Carien, good morning to you. Welcome to the show.
Good morning. Thanks for having me.
Yes, Carien, just looking at the United States of America and has boasted being the democracy in the entire world, promoting democracy, promoting equality, fairness, justice to the entire world, and obviously preaching all of that democracy. But when it comes to election time, we see this democracy being exposed and horribly exposed, Carien.
I was really kind of unpleasantly surprised when I was in the US in 2016 for the elections. Being a freelance, I can kind of do what I want. So I decided, well, let me go and stay with friends and see how the Americans do their elections. And I arrived there and expected this to be like the mother of all elections, because you know how we've grown up in South Africa with a democracy and how our elections are organized by an independent electoral commission, and it's free and fair and very strict. And I got there, and on election day, they walked us into a polling station in Maryland, near Washington, D.C. And it was very relaxed in a way, and the security wasn't too strict, and people were walking in and out, and they were voting on what looked to me like an A4 paper with a bunch of names typed on it, and on that paper you vote for everybody, from like they always say, from the dog catcher to the president. So it's just kind of a very casual system, and I thought, wait a minute, the Americans come here, they always observe African elections, and if things aren't done by the letter of the law, and if there's a bit of a disorderly line at the polling station, then it gets reported and it gets observed. But in America itself, it's a very relaxed system, and it's not very unified or very centralized either. Each state kind of conducts the election the way they want to conduct the election, because America is a federal system, and they're very proud of their, the states of each of the states have their characters. So. And there's no independent electoral commission there. There's kind of I forgot what they call it now, but a person overseeing the elections on a federal level, but they're more there in an advisory capacity than in a supervisory capacity. So it kind of made me think that, hang on, these guys are so relaxed about it, and it's great when it works. It's great when it's a kind of when the differences are very nuanced. I mean, the Republican and Democrats, the differences, there's never been big. I mean, it's fierce competition, but it's never been as divided as it is now. And the strains are beginning to show now when it's so polarized.
Well, it certainly is very, very polarized. And just yesterday, I was talking to somebody and his observation on elections, and comes election day tomorrow. And the critical issue now is we've heard already that well over 90 million people have voted already. So it's not election day, it's about election season. And this is where America, its democracy, have taken the electoral process.
Yeah, I think, how long have they been doing these votes ahead of time? I think about 3 weeks at least. So it's a very drawn out process, and you kind of wonder, are the votes kept in a secure place? How do they secure the votes for 2 weeks? Because normally in an election at home, we worry about keeping the votes overnight, keeping it safe and making sure nobody, nobody runs away with the ballot boxes. So they've taken it to election season. And it's interesting because the people who voted ahead of time, I think they're expecting the highest turnout in the century as well, which is very African in a way. I mean, if you think about our 1994 elections, we had a very high turnout. And, in South Africa itself, we've been having high turnouts. And if there's a very contested election, it's a high turnout. So in that sense, it's good. I mean, it kind of shows that people still have faith that the system can work there for them. But the people who voted ahead of time are usually the people who are more cautious about the coronavirus. I mean, I think that's what I see. That most commentators say that it could be why so many people voted ahead of time. And I think it's people who are perhaps more distrustful of Trump. So it could be telling, the amount of people who voted ahead of time. But today, I think today everybody's going to watch the exit polls and see what's happening on the day as well. So, the voting ahead of time is something I wish we had in African elections, and voting from overseas, where people can vote by postal votes. Again, you kind of question the integrity of a system like that, because securing postal votes, securing votes ahead of time, it's very tricky. But the Americans will be truly tired of voting by the end of all this, I think.
I'm sure, Carien. But also, when we look at Africa and how we run our elections, and in the article I've got in front of me, talking about Ghana, and we know that many elections are obviously held across on the African continent, and when it comes to enforcing things like observers at an election, and America always seems to say that because America is a democracy, everybody believes in America as a democracy, and no one sends even election observers to the U.S.
That's not quite true. I mean, there are election observers in the U.S. from a number of European countries. Europe does. I don't think Africa sends election observers, and I think it's time that we should. I think the African Union should send a team that side and tell the Americans, teach. I think our newer democracies can teach the old democracy a thing about democracy, a thing or two. So there are observers, although I was surprised to hear in this discussion that I attended, this webinar, I think it's still online, by the Resistance Bureau. It's online on YouTube, if anybody wants to watch it. It was a really interesting discussion, and that's what gave me the idea for this article. But on this, one of the commentators said that there are certain states in America where observers are banned. Now, if an African country bans observers, there's a big hoo-ha about it. In Tanzania last week, I've done a bit of reporting on that election, and even observers were allowed. It was a little bit more restricted, so there was a big hoo-ha about restrictions on observers, but they were still allowed. So that I was really surprised, that America, some states would ban observers from the outside. And Nick Cheeseman during this discussion, he's a professor of democracy in the UK at the University of Birmingham, and he knows everything about African elections. He's looked at all the countries, the democracies in each country, and then he mentions in Ghana, I think Ghana's elections are coming up next year, if I'm not mistaken. But the Ghanaians have a strong system. I think, like in South Africa, they have a central election authority, like our IEC. One set of rules. If you register to vote, this is how you do it. When you cast your vote, this is, it's all set down for the whole country, and everybody follows the same procedures, and get the same outcome, or supposedly get a uniform outcome and minimize rigging. So even Nick Cheeseman, and I mean, he even questioned, you said in the UK, perhaps we can learn a few lessons from Africa about how to conduct a good election. But America's system comes from, I'm not a historian and I'm not an academic on this issue, but as far as I understand, it comes from the 18th century. It's, when people were, apparently each region would vote, and then the outcome of that vote would be given to somebody who goes by carriage to Washington, D.C. to cast their vote for president, almost like, now with the ANC, when the ANC has elections, all the branch representatives come with a mandate from their branches to cast their vote for an ANC president. it almost made me think of that system. So that's what the electoral college system is based on, and it's not as fair as perhaps our proportional representation system that we always talk about. Your vote doesn't directly go for president; it goes via the electoral college, and some regions are bigger than others, and then you get a situation like in the last election in 2016, Hillary Clinton had more votes than Donald Trump, more popular votes, but he had a bigger share of the electoral college. So even in the African democracy, you question that kind of outcome. In South Africa, I think that's just why we have the proportional representation system, because of weaknesses in the Westminster system that we had before '94. So you kind of, maybe America should kind of relook their electoral system more than a century after they invented it.
Well, I'm not too sure whether they're going to relook at it, but Carien, a very, very interesting discussion ahead of the elections tomorrow, and it does obviously provide a lot more clarity in terms of how the system is working in America or not working compared to other parts around the world. But it's always,
see what the outcome is.
Well, certainly, I'm sure you're going to be spending the better part of the night monitoring events.
I must say, I'm not that fanatical. I save my energy to look at the politics at home, but I'm watching with I'll definitely watch the reporting that comes out of there, but I'm not a fanatic, perhaps.
Well, Carien, all the best to you. Thank you very much for that and for your time with us this morning. You take care.
Thanks, you too. Keep well.
Carien Du Plessis joining us this morning, and yes, America trying to teach the rest of the world, but the saying goes, sweep your own door first. The time is just gone 9 a.m. We'll come back. We are still going to be taking a look at Muslim Americans and who will Muslim Americans vote for in the election, and also we've got insurance coming through. Insurance talk with Amana Islamic Financial Solutions, and also the Salam Media Quantum Private Game Reserve Competition.
For you and for me, yeah. If you want to know why